It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, hockey fans? This is the Hockey News Big Show. I'm Michael Traikos. With me, as always, is Ryan Kennedy, editor-in-chief of the Hockey News, and we've got former NHLer Drew Shore once again with us. Gentlemen, let's start things off by going into Boston, and Nikita Zadorov is quickly becoming the villain of the NHL. A couple weeks ago, he was really laying out Matthew Schaefer with a couple cross checks. Not a fan now in Long Island, and Toronto Maple Leafs fan are also not happy with Zadorov. A week ago, he takes out Scott Laughton. On Tuesday night, it was Auston Matthews who got drilled from behind by Zadorov. Matthews currently out with a lower body injury. We don't have an update as to how long he'll be out, but Craig Berube says, I don't like the hit. This is in regards to the Zadorov on Matthews hit. I think it was a penalty. He was in a vulnerable position. So let's start things off with Ryan. What did you make of the hit, Ryan? And does the NHL now have a Nikita Zadorov problem?
Yeah, the hit was from behind, and I know with the speed of the game, you can say it's like, oh, Matthews might have been turning a bit, but I mean, he could see the numbers. We could all see the numbers on the back of Matthews' sweater. As for Zadorov being a problem, I don't think he's a dirty player per se. I think he's obviously very physical and he's obviously very big. So sometimes, not with the Matthews one, but with some of his other big collisions and we'll call it the bullying of Matthew Schaefer. I mean, that's what he's paid to do, right? I mean, he's an intimidating presence on the back end. He's a defensive defenseman, and you want him to play that game because when you get to the playoffs, those are the kind of defensemen that win you Stanley Cups. And so I think there is a line, and he crossed it with the Matthews hit. But otherwise, I don't think he's not the new Ulf Samuelsson. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and Zadorov 6'7", so there's not a whole lot of guys skating around like a Nikita Zadorov. And funny thing, before I go to Drew, before he joined the Boston Bruins, he said he was watching tape of the Bruins like playoff history and was basically like, that's the kind of game I have to play now that I'm a Bruin. So it's like, oh boy, like he was already a physical guy, and then he just really has amped it up this year. Drew, what do you make of Zadorov, and what did you make of the hit last night?
Yeah, I mean, I think agreeing with Ryan here, I think that's why the Boston Bruins signed him. He's a huge defenseman who skates pretty well for his size, and I don't think if you're the Boston Bruins, you want him reining that back at all. In terms of that hit, I didn't necessarily love it. I thought his numbers were kind of facing Zadorov for a couple seconds before the hit was delivered. Obviously, as an offensive player, anytime you're 3 or 4 feet away from the boards, that's probably the most dangerous spot you can be in. It's a huge loss for the Leafs because they can't really afford to have anything go wrong right now, let alone losing their best player.
Yeah, this is the Leaf team that was already struggling going into that Boston game. Now they're 8-1, and looking at maybe a couple games, we'll see how long Matthews is out or if he is out, because we don't know the extent of the injury. But you got to imagine losing Matthews would be huge. As well, Anthony Stolarz, whose game has been very rocky of late, he also left the game after giving up 3 goals. They weren't really pretty goals. And he's out with an upper body injury, although word is that it's not as much of a concern. What is concerning is it's not just the Leafs who are losing bodies these days. Also on Tuesday night, Quinn Hughes of the Vancouver Canucks got mixed up with Mark Scheifele and, went down awkwardly. It looked like maybe a shoulder or something injury. Again, we don't have the update, but in that same game, Thatcher Demko went down with a believed groin injury. So, 2 teams, Vancouver and Toronto, arguably without their best skater and their number 1 goalie. Drew, who's got more to worry about right now, Vancouver or Toronto with, the losses?
That's a tough question. I would just say based on expectations, I would probably have to go with Toronto. I mean, both are huge losses, both to me, the best players on their team, but I'd have to go with Toronto here.
Ryan, what do you think? Vancouver, Toronto, level of concern. Who's got it worse right now?
I'll go with the Canucks just because when I think of Vancouver, like so much of their attack is based on Quinn Hughes lugging the puck up the ice, distributing the puck. He is that elite skater and puck handler. And, we haven't seen Elias Pettersson get back to that peak Elias Pettersson that he was years ago. Kind of worried that it's not going to happen again. So, a Vancouver team that doesn't have the weapons that they used to, Quinn Hughes is so important. I mean, don't get me wrong, Auston Matthews is still one of the most important centers in the NHL. But at least with the Leafs, you have William Nylander, you have John Tavares, who can be your number one center. No problem there. Both teams are struggling. So neither of them can afford what's happening right now. But I think at least with the Leafs, they should be able to get in gear. Now, can they get into gear? They haven't done it yet this season, but at least they still have the personnel to do so up front. Whereas I just feel with Vancouver, Quinn Hughes does so much for them as a blue liner, playing like 26 minutes a game, that they need him desperately.
Yeah, I feel like, both teams, I know it's early. Like we're talking about we're 1 month into the season. And yet it feels like this is a pivotal time for both Vancouver and Toronto. Like Vancouver missed the playoffs last year. And I know Toronto's been a lock ever since Auston Matthews joined the Leafs and entered the NHL. But, could we see both teams out of the playoffs? I don't know. But if you're missing your number one player and your goalie, and you got to remember, Toronto's still without Joseph Wall, who's on a conditioning stint now with the minors, or with the minor leagues in the minors. It doesn't look good. Something to kind of keep tabs on. Another thing to keep tabs on is, which rookies are staying and which rookies are going back to junior. And Michael Misa of the San Jose Sharks and Berkely Catton of the Seattle Kraken are playing around 12 minutes a game. They're not playing every night. Both just tore it up in juniors last year. So you got to think, there's not much for them to achieve at that level again. Drew, what are your thoughts on, how these NHL teams should treat their young guys? And, another guy that's probably in that mix is Calgary defenseman Zane Parekh, who isn't playing every night. And, he's only got 1 point so far in 11 games. Any thoughts on those three guys? Can you see them all going back down?
Well, I think it just depends on the organization's overall philosophy and plan with these guys. I mean, I think we saw it with Carlson in Anaheim during his rookie year. He had some scheduled nights off and maintenance. And I think that it depends on also kind of where the team is in their cycle, right? Are they a team who is trying to make the playoffs and win now? I don't like keeping the guys and not putting them in positions to succeed. I think you're better off going to junior. But if you're an organization who can put those guys with good players, give them decent minutes, I like keeping them in the NHL just because from a development standpoint, I don't think going back to junior with what some of these guys have done does anything really for their development. But like I said, I think that it's different for every guy in every organization. But I think from what I've seen over the years that if there's a clear plan put in place on how that's going to go throughout the year, I think taking the occasional night off is fine, but I don't think it's something where if the guy's sitting 1 every 10 games, I don't think that's that big of a deal if it's a 3 and 4 and they want to give a guy a day of rest. But if it's something where they're going to be in and out of the lineup consistently throughout the whole year, I think that's a major problem.
Ryan, what do you think?
Well, I think, for a couple of these teams next year, unfortunately can't come fast enough because we will have that rule where you can send 19-year-olds to the AHL, even if they played major junior, which is the case with, like all three of these kids played major junior. It's interesting because starting with Michael Misa, I mean, the Sharks are playing really well. So it's hard to just toss them into the lineup and be like, hey, just develop. And if we lose, we lose. Like the Sharks are actually winning. So yeah. I kind of get it there. With Berkely Catton in Seattle, we've seen the Kraken do this before with Shane Wright, and it seems to have worked out. It took a while, but he's starting to become that two-way center that we thought he could be, like a middle six guy. Yeah, would he have done that quicker if they had just let him play more? It's all hindsight. Parekh to me is the one where it's like, Calgary, you're terrible. Like, you don't have a lot of guys back there that have that skill set. I mean, well, you don't have anybody like Zane Parekh. Rasmus Anderson can get you points from the back end, but they're very different players. So for me, it just feels like just play Zane Parekh. Let him make mistakes because he'll learn from them, but he'll also make plays that nobody else in the lineup can make. And I think you'll want to see that. The interesting thing for me is with all three of these players, they could be at the World Juniors for Canada. So I'm wondering if maybe that is the strategy, that these teams keep these players around. That they play most games, but not all games, as they have been so far. But then they get loaned out to Team Canada for the World Juniors. The tournament's in Minnesota, so it's not like they have to fly halfway around the world for it. And then you kind of see where they are from there. It's like, do you want to send them back to a junior team and maybe they get traded to a Memorial Cup contender in their respective leagues? Or do you just keep them in the NHL? And, you have that Olympic break as well, which would be great for just sort of development and conditioning and things like that. But I do think like Misa, I think he had like 139 points last year or something. Berkeley Catton had triple digits as well. So it's like, I don't know what they would accomplish over the long term this season if you sent them back, but I do want to see them play, and that's the tough thing about these players that are, elite, but still very young.
Drew, you make a really
you know
good
what I think
point
is
about Carlson. They did have like a maintenance kind of schedule for him. It almost felt like he was on a college schedule last year or a couple years ago, I guess it was, in the NHL. Like, what is the benefit to maybe you're not playing every night with an NHL team, but you're practicing with an NHL team. You're in the weight room with a team like that, and you're just around those guys. Can that be more beneficial than playing nightly in the OHL or CHL for that matter?
certainly. And I mean, I can't recall how many games he took off, but I mean, it was Ryan, you might know these numbers better than me, but it wasn't like he was taking off every other game, right? Like I think it was more almost one in every 7 games. And I think that's something that a lot of fans don't understand about the NHL is like the season is a grind. And especially for a young player, this year's been more jam-packed some of these weeks because of the Olympic break, right? Because they're fitting in more games during a certain time. And I think that's one of the hardest things for being a young player in the league is just being able to do it on a night in and night out basis and consistently for that long, especially against bigger, stronger players. So I think there could be benefit there. An interesting point I was just going to bring up with both of you guys, especially on the Calgary Flames side, is historically in the NHL, we haven't really seen NBA like tanking, you know what I mean, for these first and second overall draft picks. And it seems like we're starting to shift in that direction a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if some of these teams do move more into an NBA like tanking thing, which I obviously don't like, but with the success of the players in the league right now, there's obviously a huge premium on the skill level of those first couple picks.
Well, I will say, Drew, Ken Campbell has a famous story where he was talking to somebody about the Leafs, and they're like, "We're not tanking." And maybe he was talking to Mike Babcock or something. And he's like, "Well, you had Byron Froese on the power play, so yeah, you were tanking."
Yeah, they always say players don't tank, but GMs and coaches sure do, right?
Exactly.
And you can do that by just who's in the lineup and in what kind of scenario. One team that's not tanking, guys, are the Anaheim Ducks. And I don't know what the expectations were for the Ducks this year, but lo and behold, 1 month into the year, they are 11-4-1 and leading the Pacific Division. Another team that's off to just a fire start are the New Jersey Devils, who are leading the Metro with a similar 11-4-1 record. I don't know if it's going to stay this way, but if we had to look at both the Ducks and the Devils, and I'm not saying this is a precursor for, what we're going to see for the Stanley Cup final, but which teams do you think are a bigger Stanley Cup contender? And Drew, let's start with you. Is it the Ducks or the Devils?
I mean, I think it's the Devils. I think they're farther along in their development process of a lot of their players. I mean, they've been, I wouldn't say contenders, but they've been in the hunt the last couple of years. But I think for the young Anaheim Ducks prospects, everyone expected them to take a step where they were over the last couple of years, which, not to make light of it, but it wasn't a huge accomplishment. But I think if they can find a way to get in the playoffs and get those young guys some experience, I think that would be a huge win for them with where they are in their cycle. And I mean, they're off to a fantastic start. And even the value of playing, I mean, they haven't played meaningful games the last 20, really, even in the last couple of years. So I think even being able to have that kind of playoff stretch on the last 20 games of the year or after the Olympic break, whatever you want to call it, I think would be super impactful for them.
Let me put it. Ryan? Yeah, let me say this. I mean, the Devils, Drew is right. The Devils are further along. And the Ducks are also, in terms of the playoff bracket, in a tougher division, right? Because they are probably going to have to play Vegas or Edmonton, early on if they make the playoffs. But I will say this: if you think about the two teams, Anaheim's a lot bigger than New Jersey, right? Like led by Leo Carlson, you got Mason McTavish, Chris Kreider's a super solid dude. You look at the defense, and I know Gudas is out right now, but you have Gudas, Jacob Trouba, Jackson Lacombe is very strong. His uncle was actually a bodyguard for celebrities. I remember doing a story on that years ago. So Jackson Lacombe knows his way around a weight room. And also, like, who would you rather have in net right now? Lucas Dostal, who's been super hot for like a year and a half, if not longer, or Jacob Markstrom in New Jersey, who's kind of like, he gets hurt and he's kind of a roller coaster there. So I'm just saying that, like, the makeup of the Ducks, on top of the fact that they have Joel Quenneville, a multiple Stanley Cup champion.
Yes.
They're kind of really well situated. They don't have the experience for the most part yet, although, Kreider, Gudas, Trouba, they do have the experience. But I don't know, like long term, I'm like, the Ducks are looking like they could be a wagon. Like, I don't think it's going to take too much longer for them to be a real playoff threat.
Yeah,
Can we give some love? Let's give some love to my DU boy, Troy Terry, in this too. I think he gets left out a lot on these, how good all these Anaheim Ducks players are. So he's obviously gotten better every year. He's an all-star, and it's fun to watch his development.
Yeah, I feel like the only reason people aren't saying the Ducks are a playoff contender is just the lack of experience. But you got to remember, when Joel Quenneville took over that Chicago Blackhawks team, it was in a similar spot. Like, they hadn't done much, and then they all of a sudden that was their point where they were ready to start contending. And it didn't take them long to go from playoff team to Stanley Cup winner and a 3-time Stanley Cup winner during that time. So I'm kind of leaning towards the Ducks. Like, Ryan, how many times have we said, like, the Devils just are not built for the playoffs, the way that they have the smallest forwards, it feels like, in the NHL. So I don't know. I'm kind of on board with the Ducks right now. It will be interesting, like, if they can kind of keep this going, because, again, a little bit unexpected, but then when you lay it all out there, Ryan, what a roster they do have. And Cutter Gauthier just looks like a force as well.
Right. Another big guy.
Yeah. One guy who's not big, but he's a really good player is Brayden Point for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was one of the 6 players named as, immediate locks for Team Canada at the upcoming 2026 Olympics in Milan. Off to a pretty non-Brayden Point type of start. 3 goals, 9 points in 15 games. Yeah, how concerning is it that this potential, this Olympian is off his game? And does it matter, guys, that some of the players who were at the Four Nations, whether it's Sam Reinhart or Sam Bennett, are just not off to the greatest starts? Drew?
I mean, I think it's a little bit concerning, but I think for those 3 guys in particular, they had so much success in the biggest moments in hockey over the last 5 or 10 years that it's only been 15 games of the season that I'm not overly concerned. Like, I know that some people are saying that Sam Bennett should not make Team Canada's roster this year, and I'm on the complete opposite side of that, based on what he's done over the last couple cup runs, as well as at the Four Nations. Brayden Point, same thing. So, like, if I'm the GM of Team Canada, regardless of how many points Sam Bennett has, I'm taking Sam Bennett in my lineup because, let's be honest too, like at the Olympics, they might not need Sam Bennett to be scoring goals and playing on the power play, right? Like, I don't think will be his role probably for Team Canada at the Olympics. Now, Brayden Point is off to a slow start statistically, but I mean, a guy like him, he has a good week or two, and next thing you know, he's at a point a game, and people forget about the first 15.
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm more concerned for Tampa Bay than I am for Team Canada. I think, Drew, you made some great points there. I mean, Sam Bennett basically turns into Mario Lemieux in the postseason. So, when it comes to the Olympics, I think he'll be fine. But it's just weird looking into the stats with Brayden Point. Like his offensive totals have been dropping since he had that 95-point season. And granted, that's a very high bar, right? You get 95 points in the NHL. You don't have to answer a lot of questions about slumps. But, looking into it this season, if you look at his Corsi when he's on the ice, he's actually dragging down Nikita Kucherov when they play together, and he's dragging down Brandon Hagel when they play together, which is very odd because when I think of Brayden Point, I think of an excellent two-way center. So I don't know what the problem is. And maybe it's just a matter of, hey, it's a slump. Everybody goes through them. It just so happens that Brayden Point slump began at the beginning of the season, and maybe he'll knock out of it. The good news for Tampa is that they've won 7 of 10. So all of a sudden the sky's not falling anymore. But I am kind of perplexed by Point's start.
Yeah. Hey, Drew, what I'm sure every player has gone through their ups and downs. What did you do when you're kind of in a slump where the puck's just not going in or your game's just not where you want it?
Well, my whole career was a slump. That's why it ended when it did. Or else I'd still be playing. But no, I mean, I think it's different for every guy. I mean, I think sometimes guys something that people don't realize is these guys care so much that I think that most people, like the narrative of certain players in certain markets, like him not really caring. Like, yes, some guys have a more laid back personality than others for sure. But I think sometimes these guys just being able to get away from the game and almost have a reset, whether that's changing things up from having a glass of wine the night before at dinner and not sitting in your hotel room thinking about how you haven't scored in 10 games and just kind of getting back to working hard and enjoying the game and having fun, I think is what most guys kind of revert back to. But I mean, there's guys, and I mean, it happened to me a lot during my career where things are going really bad. I mean, it's really hard to get your mind off it, and it kind of consumes you 24/7.
Hey, Ryan, Drew made a good point. Like, it doesn't really matter that, Sam Bennett's struggling right now. And maybe even it doesn't matter that Sam Reinhart is struggling because, they do have a track record. And you got to imagine that John Cooper's just like, I don't care what they're looking like. They're Team Canada members. But, word out of the GM meetings that were happening in Toronto on Tuesday was that, Team Canada might be looking at more changes to the roster from what we saw at the Four Nations heading into the Olympics. And all you have to do is just look at the scoring races and think, like, how does Team Canada leave off a Macklin Celebrini or a Connor Bedard, or maybe even to that point, a Nick Suzuki or a Bo Horvat? What's your thinking on that? Should Canada kind of just go with what worked at the Four Nations, or do you think that there's going to be some turnover, or should be?
I think you can have a bit of a hybrid there. I think Celebrini definitely deserves to be there. I feel like Connor Bedard has put himself into that situation where he deserves to be there. And, the good thing about those guys in the way that they're playing right now is they could be on your quote unquote third line, and that's fine. Like Toronto's going to have guys that can kill penalties. Canada's going to have guys that can kill penalties. that's not an issue. They're going to have that high end with McKinnon and McDavid. But like, what if your third line was like Crosby, Celebrini, Bedard? Is anybody complaining about that line? No. I think, the tough thing now is, again, like if you're a guy like Mark Scheifele, who is a fantastic offensive player, but maybe not as strong defensively, he might be sort of the odd man out because we know Celebrini is a great two-way player already. Bedard has shown himself to be pretty good two-way guy so far this year. And then, of course, Nick Suzuki, I mean, that's his whole thing, right? Is he's an excellent two-way center. So I think what we've seen with Hockey Canada at all levels is they love two-way players that can dominate at both ends. And I don't see why they would, go away from that for this team, even if guys aren't hot, because they have the best example from the Four Nations in Jordan Binnington, who's just like a whatever goaltender for most of the year. And then when the pressure's on, he becomes Dominic Hasek.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you agree, Drew? Like, obviously, Brandon Hagel probably willed his way onto the team last year for the Four Nations just because he was a top 10 scorer, I believe, when that team was picked.
Yeah, I think this is something that Hockey Canada has done, like Ryan alluded to, historically very well at every level. Like, I think if you look at their World Junior teams, sometimes they'll leave off guys who have 130 points in the OHL because it's not a great fit for the team. And I think that when you look at their Olympic roster, specifically with those guys, like Connor Bedard is off to an amazing start to the year. And I actually talked a little bit about this before the season. I thought he was going to take a big jump, kind of how McKinnon did after a couple years in the league, and he's done that. For me personally, I would be looking at more of Celebrini and Suzuki to start at maybe the 13th forward because they're guys who are so versatile that depending on someone's probably going to get hurt during the tournament, right? Unfortunately. Yeah. I think that a Celebrini or a Suzuki could jump in anywhere in the lineup and bring value to the team. So if I was the GM, I don't know exactly. You guys might know. I don't know if you're probably allowed to bring 2 extra forwards, would be my guess to this tournament.
I think it's a 25-man roster.
25-man roster. So, I mean, yeah, like without having the lineup penciled in front of me, those would be 2 guys that I would love to have almost starting as my 13th and 14th forward, just because depending on what happens, if I'm John Cooper, I'm comfortable with either of those guys playing anywhere in the lineup.
No, well done. Yeah. All right. Listen, for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. And with that, we go to the action of rapid fire. And got a lot of good questions here, boys. All right, let's start with Drew. Drew, there's not going to be a 2026 NHL All-Star Weekend, obviously, because of the Olympic break. That got shifted. So what do you want to see when the NHL resumes things in 2027? Do you want to see the 3-on-3? Do you want to see a traditional game? What do you think?
I mean, I feel like they haven't done a great job with their All-Star game. I would like to somehow have it be a more competitive environment. I don't know how you do that. I don't know if you do it through a cash prize put on by the league. I don't know how you do it, but I would like to see a 5-on-5 competitive game that, I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting. Like maybe if it went back to more of like a baseball style somehow where it was like Eastern Conference versus Western Conference and whoever won the game home ice during the playoffs during the last round or something. I don't know. Something the way that baseball has done it historically. I think that would be cool.
Ryan?
I would like to see them just like kind of tighten up the skills competition because the broadcast really drags on. And I don't mind, they've done the sort of like location pieces in recent years. I thought, in Florida, they did a great job where they had things on the beach and stuff. They did the dunk tank one. But when you're actually at the rink and they're showing these things, you're just like sitting there and it's taking forever. So I wonder if like they just do something where you keep those local pieces, and we know it's going to be Long Island next year. So you can have some fun there for sure. But maybe the taped pieces are like all at the end. So you're not keeping people in the arena just staring at the Jumbotron, and just like tighten it up. This should be a quick thing. And I know you got commercial breaks and all that stuff, but a way to make it feel like it's not dragging, because some of those recent All-Star games felt like they went on forever.
All right, I got some thoughts here. Okay. Hear me
All
out.
right.
Outdoor game,
Mm-hmm.
5-on-5, North
Mhm.
America versus the world.
I could see it. Yeah.
I think that I like that. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that'll provide some motivation too, especially
Yeah.
coming off the Olympic year.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
I don't know if Canadians want to play with Americans because we're probably going to see them play in the gold medal game, but still be kind of fun.
There you go.
All right. Ryan and I were both at the Hockey Hall of Fame induction weekend on the Saturday. It was a great class, obviously, from the NHL. We saw Zdeno Chara, Duncan Keith, and Alex Mogilny all get inducted. Ryan, what was your favorite moment from the Hockey Hall of Fame induction weekend?
Well, for me, it was Jack Parker, the BU coach for 40 years. I love, people from the Boston area with great senses of humor, and Jack Parker is one of the best. He was saying that, one of the reasons that it was so great coaching in the NCAA for so long is, all the players that went through the system. He says, I always tell people I have 2 daughters and 237 sons, which I thought was a great line. The other one was, he was saying when he got the call to find out that he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, he was just about to go out boating with a friend. And, the friend was like, oh, this was in like June. And he's like, oh, when's the ceremony? And he was like, November. And the friend said, are you kidding? Do they know how old you are? So I thought that was great. That's it. There's a guy that knows how to, have fun with himself. And he really appreciated, the induction, which is always cool. And, just a guy that clearly deserved it with, the record he had with the Terriers.
How about you, Drew?
Mine was the Duncan Keith speech. I thought he did an excellent job. Obviously, he had an amazing career, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, a guy who's won gold medals, Stanley Cups, and he kind of alluded to all those moments being great. But what he really enjoyed about his career was just like the 2:30 a.m. pizza, wings, and beer sessions with his teammates, either talking about the game, complaining about something. And that kind of hit home a little bit for me. And I just thought, obviously, a guy who had an amazing career, accomplished everything. And I thought he did a good job with his speech.
Yeah, he had a funny comment also because they were asking him, like, he was drafted in the second round, 54th overall. And someone, they were asking, like, how many defensemen were selected ahead of him. And he's like, what was behind all that? He goes, bad scouting.
Yeah.
Which is great. All right. Who gets traded first this season, guys? Ryan O'Reilly or Nazem Kadri? Drew?
Ooh, tough question. I would say Nazem Kadri. I think that the Nashville Predators have a little more hope than the Calgary Flames. And if I was a contending team, I mean, he's a proven winner, gamer, he's got coming off 2 great seasons and with the cap where it is and only having a $7 million AAV, he would be one of the first guys that I would be going after. So I think Kadri goes first. But I mean, love both those guys, and it'd be great to see them both back in the mix on contending teams.
Yeah, I got to think that there is a market for both guys. How about you, Ryan? Kadri or O'Reilly? Who do you think's in more demand, and who gets traded first?
Well, I will say that Ryan O'Reilly gets traded first because he has already been quite vocal about how bummed out he is with Nashville playing as poorly as they have been. Whereas when I look at Calgary, I think they know they have a top asset in Kadri. So I could see Craig Conroy waiting sort of as long as possible to make sure he gets the most value and the most assets from that trade. So I do think that Kadri is more valuable, but I think O'Reilly will go first because Nashville just needs to do that guy a favor and get him out of there and get him back in the sun, because we've seen O'Reilly bummed out before when he was in Buffalo and it was not fun. And then he won a Stanley Cup with St. Louis, so it was all good.
Well, while we're here, just to stir the pot a little bit, it'd be great to see Stamkos get out of there too.
Oh yeah.
And get back in the mix. Like, I don't know how this would actually work from a cap perspective, but if he could somehow get back to Tampa Bay, I think would be amazing and kind of help right the ship there. But we'll see.
All right. I don't know if anyone else calls it this, but I say the hockey has its own Cy Young award, where score as many goals as you can without getting as many assists. So right now, there's 3 contenders for the Cy Young in the NHL this season. It's Vancouver's Kiefer Sherwood, who's got 10 goals and 1 assist. It's Vegas's Pavel Dorofeyev, who's got 10 goals, 1 assist. And it's Anaheim's Chris Kreider, who's got 9 goals, 3 assists. Ryan, who's going to take the Cy Young this year?
I'm going to go with Kiefer Sherwood because his most common line mates have been Drew O'Connor and Atiratu. And I don't see a lot of like setup opportunities for those guys. They're more like your bottom 6, grinders, heavier players. So I think Sherwood, like, he's getting those goals, but I can't imagine he's going to get a lot of apples.
How about you, Drew?
I'm going to take the Russian in Vegas simply because I think Rory makes a good point there. But I think from an actual goal scoring perspective, I think he will stay scoring at a higher rate versus the other 2 guys. So, I mean, yeah, actually, like, I guess their ratio might be a little bit better, but I think he's going to end up with way more goals overall.
All right, I'm going to go Kreider. Guys, last year, Chris Kreider had 22 goals and 8 assists.
He's like Bob Gibson.
Last question. We have to move this segment down. So who's feeling the heat more? Who's on the hot seat? Toronto's Craig Berube or Edmonton's Kris Knoblauch? And let's start with Drew. You got the last word here.
I think Knoblauch, simply because Berube, I think based on his resume, has a little bit of a longer rope. I also think obviously the expectations are as high as they could be in Edmonton. Getting smoked by the Colorado Avalanche 9-1, I don't think helps. It definitely turns the heat up a little bit, but I think for a relatively newer coach, I mean, he has had a ton of success since he entered the league, but I mean, especially with Connor's deal and everything else, like, they need to win in the next 2 or 3 years. I think that, like, their expectation is to win the Stanley Cup, where people in Toronto, you guys in Toronto probably say the same thing, but I don't know if that's as realistic as it is for the Edmonton Oilers. So I'm going to go with Knoblauch there.
I'll agree with you on Knoblauch. Even though he's gone to 2 straight Stanley Cup finals, simply because with Craig Berube, he always has that trump card of, hey, I took St. Louis from worst to the Stanley Cup championship. So, like, with Craig Berube, even if it doesn't start out well, even if the season doesn't start well, he has proven that he can be a turnaround artist. So he has that in his back pocket.
I'm with you, boys. I don't think Berube goes anywhere. I do think that if Edmonton does go away from Knoblauch, we could see Peter DeBoer back in the NHL. I think that would be a perfect fit if I'm the Oilers, grabbing DeBoer and I guess his longtime coaching buddy, Steve Spott. But yeah, that's it for the big show, guys. For Ryan Kennedy and Drew Shore, I'm Michael Traikos. We'll see you next time. Thanks again.